I never thought I'd be sitting at my own family's Thanksgiving table, about to expose a scandal that would shatter everything we built. But as I watched my mother arrange the silverware with precise movements, her hands trembling slightly, I knew the moment had come. The truth couldn't stay buried any longer. My name is Sarah Mitchell, and at 32, I'm the youngest of 3 siblings and the only one who stayed to care for our grandmother in her final years. While my parents and siblings built their lives in different cities, I remained in our small town, balancing my job as a financial analyst with being Grandma Rose's primary caregiver. "Sarah, dear, would you help me with these plates?" Mom called from the kitchen, her voice carrying that false cheeriness she'd adopted ever since Grandma's passing 3 months ago. I rose from the dining room table, where I'd been reviewing the documents on my laptop one last time. Each spreadsheet, each bank statement, each transfer record told a story, one that made my stomach churn. "Coming, Mom," I replied, closing the laptop but leaving it within reach. I'd need it soon enough. The house smelled of roasting turkey and Mom's famous apple pie, but the familiar holiday scents only made me more nauseous. Through the kitchen window, I could see Dad in the backyard, pretending to check the grill even though we weren't cooking anything out there. He was avoiding me, had been ever since the accusations started flying last week. "Your brother and sister should be here any minute," Mom said, handing me a stack of plates. "Try to be civil, Sarah. This ridiculous situation has gone on long enough." I bit back a harsh laugh. Ridiculous situation. That's what they were calling the systematic draining of Grandma Rose's accounts. The woman who'd raised us, who'd helped put us all through college, who'd never said no when anyone needed help, had died thinking she was nearly broke. Only she hadn't been. Not until someone started making regular withdrawals during the last year of her life. The doorbell rang, and Mom's shoulders tense. "That'll be Michael and Emily," she said, straightening her autumn-themed apron. "Remember what I said." My older brother Michael entered first, his wife Jessica and their 2 kids trailing behind him. He barely looked at me as he hung up his coat. Emily, my sister, arrived moments later with her husband Tom. The tension in the room was thick enough to cut with one of Mom's carving knives. "Happy Thanksgiving," I said, my voice steady despite the anger simmering beneath the surface. None of them knew I'd spent the last 3 months piecing together what had happened to Grandma's money. None of them knew that today wasn't just about confrontation. It was about justice. "Let's all sit down," Dad announced, finally coming in from the backyard. "The food's getting cold." We gathered around the table, a beautiful spread of traditional Thanksgiving dishes laid out before us. Mom had outdone herself, probably hoping the abundance of food would somehow paper over the cracks in our family's foundation. My laptop sat beside my plate like a loaded gun. "Should we say grace?" Emily suggested, reaching for Tom's hand. Always the peacemaker, my sister. But there would be no peace today. "Before we do that," I said, my voice cutting through the forced normalcy of the moment, "we need to talk about Grandma Rose." The reaction was immediate. Dad's fork clattered against his plate. Mom's hands froze in the act of unfolding her napkin. Michael's jaw clenched. "Sarah," Mom warned, "we've been through this. The money is gone. You need to accept that and move on." "Gone where?" I asked, opening my laptop. Because according to Grandma's bank records, someone made systematic withdrawals of exactly $10,000 every month for the last year of her life, just under the amount that would trigger bank reporting requirements. "What are you implying?" Michael demanded, his face reddening. "That one of us stole from our own grandmother." "I'm not implying anything," I replied, turning the laptop screen toward them. "I'm stating facts. Facts that show authorized transfers from Grandma's accounts to a series of offshore accounts. Facts that show someone used her personal information to open credit cards in her name. Facts that show someone systematically stole $200,000 from a woman who trusted us all." "This is ridiculous," Dad interjected, but his voice wavered. Rose was confused near the end. She probably moved the money herself and forgot about it. I shook my head, pulling out a folder I'd kept hidden under my laptop. Grandma may have been physically weak, but her mind was sharp until the end. I have her medical records right here, signed by her doctor just 2 weeks before she passed. No cognitive impairment. "You went through her medical records?" Emily gasped. "Sarah, that's private." "Someone had to investigate," I shot back. "While you were all busy planning how to sell her house and divide up her belongings, I was trying to figure out why the woman who helped raise us died thinking she couldn't afford her own medical care. The silence that followed was deafening. My mother's face had gone pale, and Dad couldn't meet my eyes. Michael stared at his plate, his knuckles white where he gripped his fork. I trusted you, I continued, my voice breaking slightly. When you all moved away, I stayed. I took care of her. I watched her worry about money she should have had. I listened to her apologize for not being able to help with Michael's kids' college fund or Emily's down payment on her house. She died thinking she failed you all somehow. That's enough. Dad slammed his hand on the table, making the glasses rattle. You have no right to come here and accuse your family of theft. I have every right, I said, pulling up another document on my laptop. Because I have proof. The transfers were made from Grandma's home computer, but not during her usual hours. They were made late at night when only one other person had access to her house. Someone who convinced her to sign over power of attorney just months before the transfers began. All eyes turned to my mother, who had gone completely still. Mom? Emily whispered, horror dawning on her face. I did it for this family, Mom said quietly, her voice barely audible. Your father's business was failing. Michael needed help with the kids' private school. Emily and Tom were about to lose their house. She had all that money just sitting there. It wasn't your money to take. I stood up so quickly my chair toppled backward. You stole from your own mother. You watched her suffer, thinking she'd somehow mismanaged her entire life's savings. You don't understand, Mom pleaded, reaching for my hand. I yanked it away. We were desperate. I was going to pay it back before she noticed. But then the market turned and your father's investments. Return Grandma's money, I demanded, my voice shaking with rage, or I'm going to the police. You wouldn't dare, Dad growled, standing to face me. If you do this, you're no longer part of this family. You'll never see your mother again. I looked around the table at the faces of my family members. Michael wouldn't meet my eyes. Emily was crying silently. Mom stared at her hands, shoulders slumped in defeat. Dad glared at me, his threat hanging in the air. First, I said, opening one final file on my laptop, let's see exactly where that money went. Because I have every transfer, every account number, and every transaction right here. Should we start with the cruise you and Dad took last spring, Mom? Or maybe Michael's new boat? Or how about Emily's emergency home renovation? The color drained from their faces as I turned the laptop around, showing them the meticulous trail I pieced together over the past 3 months. Each transaction, each lie, each betrayal, laid bare on the screen before them. My God, Emily whispered, staring at the evidence of her own guilt. What have we done? The turkey grew cold on the table, forgotten as the weight of their actions finally settled over the room. Outside, children played in neighbors' yards, their laughter a stark contrast to the heavy silence that had fallen over our family gathering. The sunlight streaming through the windows seemed to mock the darkness we'd uncovered. I'll give you all 1 week, I said, closing my laptop and gathering my things. 1 week to transfer the money back to Grandma's estate, which, as executor, I control. If you don't, these records go to the police and the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit. Sarah, please, Mom begged, tears streaming down her face. We're your family. I paused at the dining room doorway, looking back at the people I trusted my entire life. No, I said quietly, family doesn't steal from family. Family doesn't let their mother die thinking she was a failure. You're not my family anymore. As I walked out of the house, I heard Mom collapse into sobs behind me. Dad called my name, his voice a mixture of anger and desperation. But I didn't turn back. The truth had finally come out, and there was no going back to the way things were. In my car, I sat for a moment, my hands shaking on the steering wheel. The manila envelope on my passenger seat contained copies of all the evidence, one set for the police, one for my lawyer, and one for the family attorney. I learned from Grandma Rose that it was always wise to have a backup plan. The November wind rattled the remaining leaves on the trees as I pulled out of the driveway. Behind me, the house where I'd spent every Thanksgiving of my life grew smaller in my rearview mirror. But for the first time since Grandma's death, I felt lighter. The truth was out, and whatever came next, I knew I'd done the right thing. Grandma Rose had always told me that integrity was worth more than gold. Today, I'd proven her right, even if it meant losing the family I thought I had. As I drove away from the wreckage of our Thanksgiving dinner, I realized that sometimes the greatest act of love is holding those we care about accountable for their actions. The sun was setting as I headed home, casting long shadows across the road. One chapter of my life had just ended, but another was about to begin. And this time, I would write it on my own terms. The week after Thanksgiving passed in a blur of blocked phone numbers and ignored emails. I lost count of how many times my mother tried to reach me from different numbers, each voicemail more desperate than the last. My siblings alternated between threats and pleas, but I stood firm. The deadline was set, 7 days to return Grandma's money. I took a week off work, claiming a family emergency, which wasn't entirely a lie. My small apartment became my fortress as I prepared for every possible outcome. Security footage from my building's cameras showed both Michael and Emily trying to get in on separate occasions, only to be turned away by the front desk staff. I'd warned them this might happen. Ms. Mitchell. Georgie, my building's security guard, called up on Tuesday evening. Your father is here. He's quite insistent about seeing you. I sighed, rubbing my temples. Don't let him up, Georgie, just like we discussed. He says he has important documents for you. Tell him to mail them to my lawyer. I ended the call, my hands shaking slightly as I poured myself a glass of wine. My phone buzzed with a text from Emily. You're destroying this family. Mom hasn't stopped crying for days. Is this what you want? I stared at the message, anger bubbling up inside me. Was I destroying the family? Or have they destroyed it themselves when they decided to steal from their own mother? I typed out a response. The only thing being destroyed is the fiction that our family was honest. You have 4 days left. The next morning, I woke to an email from Michael. The subject line read PROFYWR. Attached were bank statements from his personal account, supposedly showing that he'd earned the money for his boat through investments. I almost laughed. He'd always been bad with numbers, and these doctored statements were painfully obvious to someone who worked in finance. I forwarded the email to my lawyer, adding it to the growing file of evidence. Sharon, my attorney, had been Grandma Rose's friend for 30 years. When I first discovered the suspicious transfers, she was the one who helped me gather the documentation legally. Your brother just shot himself in the foot, Sharon said when she called me later that day. Falsifying bank statements is a separate crime. Does he realize that? He never was very good at thinking things through, I replied, staring out my window at the gray December sky. Any word from their lawyer? Nothing official yet, but I heard through the grapevine that they're consulting with criminal defense attorneys. They're taking this seriously, Sarah. Good, I said firmly. They should be. That afternoon, I visited Grandma's grave. The cemetery was empty, dead leaves skittering across the frost-covered ground. Her headstone was simple, just as she would have wanted. I placed fresh flowers beside it and sat on the cold earth. I wish you could see this, Grandma, I whispered. I wish you knew that you didn't do anything wrong. It was them. It was all them. My phone buzzed. Another text from Mom. Please, Sarah. We can work this out as a family. Don't do this to us. I showed the message to Grandma's headstone. They still don't get it, do they? They're not sorry they stole from you. They're just sorry they got caught. The wind picked up, cutting through my coat. As I stood to leave, I noticed a familiar car pulling into the cemetery. Mom's silver Mercedes. I quickly made my way to my own car, but she must have seen me. She pulled up beside me just as I reached for my door handle. Sarah, wait. She jumped out, still wearing her cooking apron. Please just talk to me. You have 3 days left, I said without looking at her. Return the money or face the consequences. We can't. She grabbed my arm. We don't have it anymore. The money's gone, invested, spent, tied up in the business. If you go to the police, you'll send us all to jail. Is that what you want? I finally turned to face her. The woman who had taught me right from wrong, who had always insisted on honesty, now stood before me, begging me to ignore her crimes. What I want, I said slowly, is for you to face what you did. Grandma died thinking she was a failure, that she had somehow mismanaged her entire life savings. Do you know what that did to her? I never meant. Mom's voice cracked. We were going to pay it back, but things kept coming up, and then she got sick so quickly. Stop making excuses. I yanked my arm free. You had choices. We all had choices. Michael chose his boat over his grandmother's peace of mind. Emily chose her home renovation over honesty. You and Dad chose luxury cruises over your own mother's dignity. And you're choosing revenge over family, she shot back. No, Mom, I'm choosing justice over enabling theft. I got into my car and started the engine. Through the window, I added, 3 days. Figure it out. That evening, as I sorted through old photos of happier times, my doorbell rang. Through the security camera, I saw Emily standing there, alone. Sarah, please, her voice came through the intercom. I have something to tell you. Something Mom and Dad don't know. Against my better judgment, I buzzed her up. When she entered my apartment, I noticed she looked terrible, eyes red from crying, hair unbrushed. Make it quick, I said, keeping the door open. Emily sank onto my couch, wringing her hands. I knew, she whispered. I knew about the money before you did. Mom told me when she needed help moving some of it around. I helped her hide the transfers from Dad's business accounts. I stared at her, speechless. Emily had always been the good one, the honest one. Or so I thought. Why are you telling me this now? Because I can't sleep. I can't eat. Every time I look at my renovated kitchen, I feel sick. She pulled out her phone, hands shaking. I've already transferred my share back to the estate account. It's not much, only about $40,000, but it's everything I had. I sat down heavily in my armchair. Does anyone else know you did this? She shook her head. Mom and Dad would be furious. Michael would never speak to me again. But I couldn't live with it anymore. For the first time since Thanksgiving, I felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe there was still something worth salvaging in our family after all. Thank you for telling me, I said quietly. But you understand this doesn't change anything with the others, right? They still have to return the money. Emily nodded, wiping her eyes. I know. And Sarah? I'm sorry, not just about the money, but for not standing up for you when you were taking care of Grandma alone. We all took advantage of you. After she left, I checked the estate account. Sure enough, there was a transfer from Emily for exactly $40,000. I forwarded the transaction details to Sharon, then sat in the growing darkness of my apartment, thinking about family, forgiveness, and the different forms courage can take. The next morning, I woke to multiple missed calls from Dad. When I finally listened to his voicemail, my blood ran cold. You think you're so clever, don't you? His voice was slurred. He'd been drinking. Well, guess what? I found Grandma's old journals. All those times you borrowed money from her. Every penny she gave you for grad school. I'm going to make sure everyone knows you're just as guilty as the rest of us. I almost laughed. Every loan Grandma had given me was properly documented, and I'd paid back every cent, with interest. The receipts were all there in my files. Dad was grasping at straws. 2 days left until my deadline. Emily's confession had thrown everything into chaos. Michael was now demanding to know how I'd convinced our sister to turn against the family. Mom had taken to sitting in her car outside my office building, trying to catch me between meetings. Dad's threats grew increasingly desperate. I forwarded every message, every email, every voicemail to Sharon. The file of evidence was growing thick with their own words condemning them. You don't have to go through with this, Sharon reminded me during her daily check-in. We could still handle it privately, keep it out of the courts. But I thought about Grandma Rose, lying in her hospital bed, apologizing for not having enough money to help her grandchildren anymore. I thought about the shame in her eyes when she had to ask me to help pay for her medications. I thought about how she died believing she'd have failed her family, never knowing that her family had failed her. No, I said firmly. They have 2 days left. Then we do this my way. The truth was, I hoped it wouldn't come to that. I hoped that somewhere beneath their excuses and justifications, my family would find the decency to make things right. Emily had found her conscience. Maybe the others would too. But as the sun set on the 6th day after Thanksgiving, I knew in my heart that tomorrow would change everything. One way or another, the truth about my family would come out. The only question was whether they would face it voluntarily or be forced to face it in court. I sat at my window, watching the city lights blink on as darkness fell. Tomorrow would bring either redemption or destruction. Either way, there would be no more hiding, no more lies, no more pretending we were something we're not. Grandma Rose had always said that character shows itself in the hardest moments. Tomorrow we would all show exactly who we really were. The morning of the deadline dawned cold and gray. I hadn't slept much, spending most of the night checking the estate account for any transfers. Besides Emily's $40,000, there had been nothing. As I sipped my morning coffee, my phone lit up with a text from Sharon. They've requested a family meeting. All of them. Today at 2 p.m. at my office. My hands shook slightly as I responded. Did they say why? No, but they've brought their own lawyer. Should I set it up? I stared at my reflection in the window, remembering Grandma's words. Sometimes the hardest paths lead to the most important destinations. I texted back, set it up. The hours until the meeting crawled by. I tried to work but couldn't focus. At 1:30, I gathered my files, every bank statement, every transfer record, every piece of evidence I collected, and headed to Sharon's office downtown. The conference room was already full when I arrived. Mom sat between Dad and their lawyer, a sharp-suited man I recognized from his billboards around town. Michael slouched in his chair, avoiding eye contact. Emily sat apart from the others, her face pale but determined. Sharon stood as I entered. Thank you all for coming, she began, but Dad's lawyer cut her off. Let's cut to the chase, he said, opening his briefcase. My clients are prepared to make an offer. I sat down, keeping my expression neutral. The only offer I'm interested in is full restitution of the stolen money. Sarah, Mom pleaded, be reasonable. We've come up with a payment plan. We can return the money over 5 years with interest. That's not good enough, I said firmly. The deadline is midnight tonight. Either the money is returned in full, or I go to the authorities. Michael slammed his hand on the table. You self-righteous little. Michael, their lawyer warned. Let me handle this. He turned to me. Ms. Mitchell, surely you understand that demanding immediate repayment of such a large sum is unrealistic. My clients are offering a generous. Generous? I laughed. They stole from their dying mother. They watched her suffer, thinking she had nothing left, and now they want to negotiate. Sarah, Dad's voice was tight with anger. You're not leaving us any choice. No, I stood up, unable to contain my emotions any longer. You're the ones who made choices. You chose to steal. You chose to lie. You chose to let Grandma die thinking she was broke. Every step of the way, you had choices. The room fell silent. Even the lawyer looked uncomfortable. I have something to say, Emily spoke up suddenly. Everyone turned to look at her. I returned my share of the money because it was the right thing to do. Not just legally, but morally. What we did, what I helped do, it was wrong. Shut up, Emily, Michael snapped. You're just trying to save yourself. No, she met his gaze steadily. I'm trying to save what's left of my conscience. Maybe you should try it. Mom burst into tears. Dad put his arm around her, glaring at Emily and me. You've turned my daughters against me, he accused. You did that yourself, I replied quietly. Every time you chose money over honesty. Every time you watched Grandma worry about her finances and said nothing. Every time you spent her stolen money on luxuries while she rationed her medications. Sharon cleared her throat. It's 3 p.m. now. You have 9 hours left to make this right. The estate account details haven't changed. The lawyer leaned over to whisper something to my parents. Dad shook his head furiously. Michael stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. This is bullshit, he announced. I'm not giving back a cent. Take me to court if you want. It's your word against ours. I opened my laptop calmly. Actually, it'll be the evidence against you. Like this email you sent me trying to pass off falsified bank statements. Or these recordings of Dad's threatening voicemails, or Mom's power of attorney documents which she used to make unauthorized transfers. Color drained from their faces as I played a short clip of Dad's drunken threat about Grandma's journals. The lawyer's expression turned grim. May I have a moment alone with my clients? He asked. Sharon and I left the conference room. Through the glass walls, I could see the lawyer talking intensely to my family, gesturing at documents spread across the table. Mom had her face in her hands. Dad looked deflated. Michael paced the room like a caged animal. Whatever happens, Sharon said quietly, you did the right thing. After what felt like hours, the lawyer opened the door. We'd like to discuss terms. The next few hours were a blur of negotiations and paperwork. In the end, faced with overwhelming evidence and the threat of criminal charges, they agreed to full restitution. Dad would sell his share in the business. Mom would liquidate her investment accounts. Michael would sell his boat and cash out his savings. The transfers will be completed by midnight, the lawyer assured us. You have my word. As we prepared to leave, Mom approached me one last time. Sarah, please, once this is done, can we try to be a family again? I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw not the confident mother of my childhood, but a woman who had lost her way so completely she couldn't even see the path back. I don't know, I answered honestly. Trust isn't just about money. It's about character. And right now, I don't know who any of you really are. Emily caught up with me at the elevator. What happens now? She asked. Now we wait, I replied, and see if they follow through. As I drove home in the gathering darkness, I thought about family, about legacy, about the weight of truth and the cost of justice. The hardest part wasn't exposing their theft. It was accepting that the family I thought I had never really existed. My phone buzzed with a notification from the bank. The first transfer had come through. Then another, and another. By midnight, every cent would be back in Grandma's estate account. But the real costs, the shattered relationships, the broken trusts, the lost innocence, that could never be repaid. 3 months after that fateful meeting in Sharon's office, I stood in Grandma Rose's house, now legally mine as the executor of her properly restored estate. The winter sunlight streamed through the windows, casting long shadows across the hardwood floors she had kept polished for 40 years. The money had been returned, down to the last penny. Dad had sold his business share at a loss. Mom's investment accounts were emptied. Michael's boat and savings were gone. The full $200,000 was back where it belonged, but the cost had been far greater than just financial. I hadn't spoken to my parents or Michael since that day. They had made the transfers as agreed, then retreated into silence. Through Emily, who remained the only family member I still talked to, I heard snippets of their new reality. Dad had taken a job as a manager at a hardware store chain. Mom was selling her designer clothes online. Michael and his wife had downsized to a smaller house. They're struggling, Emily said during one of our weekly coffee meetings. Not just with money, but with everything. Mom keeps asking if you'll ever forgive them. I ran my finger around the rim of my coffee cup, considering her words. Forgiveness isn't the issue, I finally replied. Trust is, and I don't know if that can ever be rebuilt. The truth was, I didn't want it rebuilt, not in the same way. The old foundation had been rotten, built on lies and manipulation. If there was ever to be a relationship again, it would have to be something entirely new. Using part of the restored money, I established a scholarship in Grandma Rose's name at the local community college where she had taught English for 30 years. The first recipient was a young woman whose essay about financial hardship and family obligation had brought tears to my eyes. Grandma would have loved her. The rest of the money was invested properly, just as Grandma had always intended. Some would go to help students like her scholarship recipient. Some would be preserved for future generations, but this time with ironclad protections and oversight. One sunny March morning, as I was sorting through Grandma's old papers, I found a letter she had written to me just weeks before her death. The envelope was marked, "For Sarah, when you need it most." My hands trembled as I opened it. My dearest Sarah, if you're reading this, I'm gone, and you've probably discovered what happened to my savings. Yes, I knew. Not everything, but enough. I watched your mother's desperation, your father's shame, the way money changed them all. But I also watched you, your integrity, your strength, your unwavering sense of right and wrong. Don't let the weight of their choices break your spirit. Sometimes the greatest act of love is holding those we care about accountable for their actions. It's a lesson I wish I had the courage to teach them myself. You were always different from the others. Where they saw money as power, you saw it as responsibility. Where they took, you gave. Keep that spirit, my darling girl. It's worth more than any inheritance I could leave you. Remember, family isn't just about blood and names. It's about trust, respect, and choosing to do what's right even when it hurts. You've always understood that better than anyone. I love you, and I'm proud of you, not for what you achieve or what you have, but for who you are. All my love, Grandma Rose. Tears rolled down my cheeks as I folded the letter. Even at the end, she had been teaching me, guiding me, believing in me. Emily came over that evening to help me continue sorting through the house. As we worked, she asked, "Do you think we'll ever have family dinners again?" I looked around the dining room where we'd shared so many meals, so many memories, both real and pretended. "Not like before," I said. But maybe someday we can build something new, something honest. She nodded, understanding. Grandma would have liked that. As spring approached, I began to feel the weight of the past few months lifting. The scholarship program was thriving. The house was almost finished being sorted. And though my family was forever changed, I felt strangely at peace. Grandma Rose had taught me that true wealth isn't measured in dollars but in dignity, not in possessions, but in principles. In fighting for her justice, I had found my own strength. In losing my family, I had found my truth. Sometimes, late at night, I sit in her favorite chair and imagine her here with me. I think she'd be proud, not of the money I recovered, but of the integrity I protected. After all, that was always her greatest legacy.